Good morning. We are thankful that you are here with us this morning. My name is William Murphy. I'm one of the student ministers here at Hendersonville. And if someone hasn't had the opportunity to welcome you this morning, I just want to say welcome and thank you for being here and welcome to into the place where Jesus is present in the midst of his people this morning. Today is a good day. Some might call it Senior Sunday. Some might call it Star Wars Day. For me, myself, I love May the 4th, mainly because I'm a huge Star Wars fan. But today we are here to celebrate our seniors, and it is Senior Sunday. And it is a good day, a day where we celebrate this huge rite of passage that they are getting to walk through. It's a time of new beginnings, a time of different roads to walk down, a time of new opportunities, a time of new starts. And with all seasons of new beginnings, there often comes new hope, new dreams, and also new challenges and displacements. And as we're walking through the book of James, James is writing to a group of people that for some reason or another are experiencing a season of displacement. Last week, John Micah talked about how James is a book that is written to the 12 tribes that are scattered or displaced among the nations. The church in Jerusalem had experienced persecution. There was tension between the Jews that believed in Jesus and his resurrection and those that did not believe in the resurrection. And that all came to a head in Acts chapter 7, and Stephen finds himself at the crossroads of this tension that is experienced, and he was murdered for his belief in Jesus. And then Acts chapter 8 talks a little bit about what happened after that moment. And it says that there was great persecution that broke out, and the people of God were scattered or displaced throughout the land. And for the people of God, in one moment, how everything was good, everything was running well, everything was planned, all of a sudden they were in a new little landscape in need of a little bit of encouragement. And James is a book that writes a letter that is an encouraging letter, full of wisdom, in the middle of a difficult time. And this morning, I want to invite you just to open up your Bibles into James chapter 1. We're going to be parking in James chapter 1, just the first couple verses for a little bit this morning. Because I believe here in James chapter 1, James gives some wisdom for the moments when we're displaced in new seasons of life. New seasons of life that a lot of our seniors are getting ready to experience at some point in their life. And maybe what some of us in this room might be even experiencing right now. When I was in college, I had a friend, and my friendship with this person didn't really start out really well. It was pretty rocky, and the reason was because he had the ability to look me in the eye and tell me the thing that I needed to hear, even if it wasn't the thing that I wanted to hear. And it drove me absolutely nuts. And in college, I wasn't necessarily living the most sustainable life. I was taking 20-plus hours a semester of classes. I was running cross-country for the school. I was working in admissions for the school. And I was helping friends run a college ministry. I was busy. I was constantly going. And one night around 10 o'clock, I was working on homework. And he walks into my room and he looks at me and he says, "Man, you look terrible." And I'm like, "Thank you. Good to see you too," right? He said, no, seriously, like, you look terrible. Get up and look in the mirror just for a second. And he was right. I got up, I looked in the mirror, and I saw I was stressed out. I was worried. I probably hadn't showered in a couple days. Like, I hadn't slept much. It was not a good situation. And it was in that moment that I needed a friend to come in and tell me the thing that I needed to hear, even though if it wasn't the thing that I wanted to hear. And I found that having people in your life that are willing to do that actually leads to a better life. Something begins to break loose in you. Someone cares enough just to say, "Hey, here's what you need to hear." And here is what I have, like a love-hate relationship with this passage in James chapter 1, because James is going to come in. And what he's going to be talking about this morning is he's going to give us the things that we need to hear when we're experiencing moments of suffering, struggle, and hardship. Life is falling apart for some people. Some people are going through moments of struggling this morning. Life's falling apart. You might have lost your job. Relationships are struggling. Your faith is struggling. Maybe your health is even failing. And I don't know what's going on with everybody in this morning. But what I've learned in my own season of going through hardship, the last thing that I typically want to do is talk about more seasons of hardship. The last thing I want to do when I'm going through hardship myself is to sit down and have this difficult conversation in James chapter 1 where we talk about hardship. So I'm just going to ask for all of us as we walk through James chapter 1 just to buckle up. Hang on, because I believe that there is a good news that is sitting here in James chapter 1 waiting for us. And I think this message is really, really important. It matters, and for two reasons that I think that it matters, not just for those that might be struggling right now, but also for those who have walked through hardships in the past, but also for those that might experience hardships in the future. And I want to go through just two things. I don't know if you take notes, but the first reason I think this message on suffering is so important is because James is going to remind us that we're a human being. James is going to remind us that, hey, you are human. And if you are a human being, the reality is that if you have suffered, or maybe you are suffering, or again, you will suffer one day in the future, you will be tried and you will be tested at one point in your life. So what James is going to say in this conversation, whether it feels relevant now or in the past or in the future, the reality is that it is important and relevant to you. It's a universal experience that we have as human beings to walk through hardships. But that's not the only reason. Part of the reason I believe it's also important is because it's not just our universal human experience. I believe it is a unique experience as followers of Jesus that we experience this. And this is what I believe Jesus meant when he says over and over again, he says, hey, you are my follower, and if you are my follower, you're not just going to suffer. You're not just going to be tested because you're a human being. You're going to be tested uniquely because you're with me. And what Jesus says in Mark chapter 4, he's kind of telling this story about 4 different types of soils. And he says, whoops, didn't mean to hit that. He says, hey, there's a lot of people that early on in life, they get really excited about Christianity. Right? They experience the life of Jesus. They get really excited for the life of Jesus. And he says, hey, there's a seed that's planted in shallow soil. And their life, it springs up. Everything's great. They're experiencing the goodness of life of Jesus, but then hardships begin to come in. The moments of persecution, the moments of suffering come into their lives, and they walk away from the faith. That's what Jesus is talking about, and he says, as we as human beings get closer to the end of all things, like that moment where Jesus is going to physically return to earth and he's going to judge the living and the dead and reign in this new kingdom. Jesus says, hey, as we approach these days, suffering, hardship, and testing is going to increase for the followers of Jesus specifically. And there's some sobering words that he gives in Matthew chapter 24 when he says, hey, because of the increase of wickedness, because of the things that the world is going to go through, the love of so many people who follow Jesus is going to grow cold. And I think it's important because it's not just that you're a human being that's going to experience suffering, but because you, as a follower of Jesus, are going to experience it uniquely. And I don't know, and if you don't really know what to do with it, the scriptures kind of point towards you will be tempted to abandon Jesus and the life of Jesus when those moments come in your life. And James, he's going to sit down. And he's going to write a letter to those who are experiencing the hard times. And he's going to tell them what they need to hear, even if it's not what they wanted to hear here in this moment. So let's look here in James chapter 1 together. We're going to start in verse 2. This is what it says. Nate read it just a minute ago. He said, consider it pure joy, brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete and not lacking anything. And if any one of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. But when you ask, you must believe and not doubt, because the one who doubts is like the wave of the sea, blown and tossed by the wind. That person should not expect to receive anything from the Lord. Such a person is double-minded and unstable in all that they do. And there's so many things that we can unpack here in James chapter 1 in just these first few verses. But I just want to kind of follow a framework that's going to help us walk through kind of this gospel message about suffering together. We're going to talk about the bad news of suffering. We're going to talk about the good news of suffering. And then we're also going to talk about, hey, what do we do when we face suffering? So let's just start. Let's get into the bad news. Let's rip the Band-Aid right off. If you look at verse 2 with me, it says, consider it pure joy, brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials. He says the word whenever. Right? I don't know if you write in your Bibles, but you should definitely underline that word whenever. He doesn't say you face if you face trials. He says whenever you face trials. Right? And that's kind of the first one, is that we should expect. We talked about this just a little bit ago. You should expect that trials are going to come. You don't need to worry about them. You don't need to be fearful about them. You should expect them right out of the gate. And James is going to say, hey, this is not this is not just something that some of us experience. This is not just something that, hey, we walked into an unlucky moment in life. This is something that all human beings are going to walk through at some point in your life, if you haven't already. When I lived in Jackson, Tennessee, I worked a part of an after-school mentoring program, and I was partnered with a kid named Kyle. Now, Kyle, he had been dealt a lot of hard cards to play in his life. His mom was struggling to make ends meet. His dad wasn't in the picture. He was struggling in school. And so here in this mentoring program, it was an opportunity just to walk with a kid that was walking through a lot at an early age. He was 8 years old. And so we would sit down, we would do homework, and let me tell you, homework from an 8-year-old is really challenging, even for myself. But we would sit there, we would work on homework, and then there was an opportunity after we would sit and work through schoolwork, and we would play an activity. One of the most popular activities we would play is dodgeball. Now, Kyle, at first, he didn't really like dodgeball. He was very content to sit off to the side and watch other people pelt each other with balls, right? But I was determined I was going to get Kyle to play. I was going to get him to invest in this game. And so after a few weeks of him he finally agreed to come and play dodgeball. And I'm not kidding. Within 5 minutes, one of the older kids absolutely pelted him with the ball right in the face. It was a great moment, but also for Kyle, it was an absolutely terrifying moment, right? He was excited to play for the first time. He came and he experienced the game. And then here in this moment, he was like, why in the world did I get hit? And I was like, dude, it's in the name. Like the game is they're going to throw a ball and your job is to dodge it, but he just couldn't get by the fact that someone would throw a ball and hit him with a ball. And so here in this moment, like as I'm thinking about the book of James, and I'm thinking about what James is writing, I think for so many of us, as we follow Jesus, we say yes to Jesus, we get excited about the things of Jesus, we think that everything's supposed to be easy and comfortable and good, and then we get hit with the ball, and we come running out of the game shocked and surprised that we got hit. And here in James verse 2, he's saying, hey, if you're a human being, if you're a follower of Jesus, you should expect that trials are going to come. And the second thing regarding the bad news is that we shouldn't just expect it. We should expect trials to come in many different shapes and sizes. You should expect many kinds. Look again at verse 2. He says, whenever you face trials of what? Of many kinds. James says, hey, sometimes it's going to be a relational struggle. Sometimes it's going to be a physical struggle. Sometimes it's going to be a financial struggle. Sometimes it's going to be a struggle going on with somebody that you care about. Sometimes it's going to be a spiritual struggle or an emotional struggle, or sometimes it's going to be all of those wrapped in one. But what James says is not only can you count on the suffering of the trials to come, but you should expect it to come in many different shapes and sizes. And James is going to love us enough to tell us the truth. And he says, hey, for some of these things that you're going to experience are going to be hard. But he doesn't just stop with the bad news. Like if he just left it there, man, would that not be a most depressing opening to a letter? He doesn't just leave it there. The good news, if you could sum it up, is that James is going to talk about how Jesus doesn't waste an ounce of our suffering. Jesus is going to come into the midst of our lives and not waste an ounce of the suffering and the hardships or the trials that we walk through. And that is the good news. I think we're about one of my favorite stories in the Old Testament. It's about a guy named Joseph, and he experienced a ton of hardship. His brothers were jealous of him. They didn't like him very much. And because of their hatred of him, of their disdain of him, they threw him into slavery into a country far away from home, which eventually leads to years in prison. And as you continue watching the story of Joseph, you see that God's able to use Joseph's experience for his redemptive purpose. And you see this beautiful moment towards the end of Joseph's life, that after he's come into power in Egypt and he's saved thousands of people, including his own family, you see this beautiful moment here in Genesis chapter 50. It says, Joseph said to his brothers, "Don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. So then don't be afraid. I will provide for you and your children." And he reassured his brothers and spoke kindly to them. Here in this moment, Joseph is saying, hey, you meant this evil to bring me down. But God turned it to good. God used it. And you're going to hear very similar words from James. And that's also what Jesus says in John chapter 16. He says, you are going to face trials. You are going to face hardships. But take heart. I have overcome the world. You are going to face trials. But take heart. I have overcome the trouble. And as followers of Jesus, we don't really get a hall pass around the suffering. We don't get a get out of jail free card when it comes to hardships and trials. But that God is in the midst of it, and He is the one who strengthens us, and He produces something within us in the midst of all the things that are going on. Now, I wish we could spend more time on this, but as I think about the things that we experience in our suffering and how we prepare for the suffering, I notice that what James says is, hey, the first part of this, as you prepare for it, is it starts by investing in relationship. It starts with a relationship, and you kind of have to read between the lines, but I want you to see this in verse 2. He says this, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters." In other words, everything that James speaks about when he talks about the good news of suffering is good news only for the people who are working in covenant relationship with God and one another. James says, hey, the bad news is universal, right? Suffering is universal. Everybody's going to experience it, but the good news is unique to those who are walking in covenant relationship with God and each other. And James is going to say, hey, if you don't want to just endure the suffering, but you want to get stronger, you want to experience the redemptive qualities and the realities of suffering, it starts with being rightly in a relationship with the Lord and walking that out in the context of a Christian community. And for some of you, I think this is important for all of us, right? For some of us, this might just be where we have to start. I've got to get my relationship right with the Lord. I've got to walk in Christian community because, guys, the promises of redemption that is attached to suffering in Scripture is a promise that is uniquely reserved for those who are walking in the right relationship with God in the context of a Christian community. And so often I hear some verses when people are walking through trials. I hear a verse quoted often of Romans 8:28 that says, you know that God works together for all things. And oftentimes that's where a lot of people like to stop when it comes to quoting that verse. But if you keep looking into it, Romans 8:28 says, hey, you know that God works all things together for the good of those who love him and live according to his purposes. That the promise is not just that God works all things out because you're a human being. The promise is that God works all things out because you're a human being surrounded in the right relationship with him in the context of the community of followers of Jesus. So what do you do kind of in the moment of suffering? What do you do in the moment that comes? And you look around in your life and you ask yourself, am I in a good relationship with the Lord? Am I surrounded with community of those who follow him? And the second thing that James gives us is it's not just about a relationship. The second thing is how do we shift our perspective? And let's deal with kind of a crazy verse that James is going to make here at the beginning of verse 2. He says this, consider it pure joy. It sounds ridiculous, right? Like, consider it pure joy. You really want me to be happy about this when I face trials? And I want you to notice what James says, because he doesn't say it is pure joy when you face trials. He doesn't say put on a happy face. He doesn't say sweep it under the rug. He says, no, consider it. You have to shift your perspective on how you view these things when you're in the midst of trial. Consider it pure joy. You have to view it in a way that nobody else views it as part of the way. That's part of how you prepare for suffering. It's part of the way you stand strong in the midst of suffering and hardship is that you have to shift your perspective. Seniors, when I was your age, I was walking through trials of my own. My family had just been uprooted. My parents had just told me that they were going to get a divorce. Life as I knew it completely changed. And there in that moment, it was really easy for me to be consumed by all the hardships that was going on in my life. And one day, my youth minister at the time sent me this verse that said, hey, consider it pure joy when you face trials of many kinds. And guys, it made me mad. It made me super upset. And so I called him up and I was like, what do you mean? I'm supposed to be happy that my parents are walking through this? I'm supposed to be happy that my family has been uprooted? I'm supposed to be happy about all the things that are going on? And he stopped me and said, William, James, he's not telling you to be joyful about the circumstances that you're experiencing. What he's telling you is that if you shift your perspective about what you're walking through, and you learn and look to see how God is shaping and forming you in the midst of the trials you're experiencing, it is there where you will find your joy. When we shift our perspective and see how God is working and how God is moving and how God is up to something, it is there where you find your joy. And when I shifted my perspective, it didn't mean that I had to ignore the pain. It didn't mean that I had to gloss over it. It was a moment where I chose to see it differently. That from now on, there were new possibilities. There were new relationships, new hopes, new dreams that I could participate in, all because I chose to see things just a little bit differently. Not as a problem to be solved or a force to be reckoned with, but a new opportunity in front of me to walk in brand new ways with Jesus. That Jesus is going to say, hey, yeah, James is going to say here in this moment, like, yeah, there's bad news. Suffering is going to come in all shapes and sizes. But there's also good news, better news. It's Jesus wants to work through it. Jesus wants to participate in the middle of the things that you're walking through. And if you look here in this moment, you see and you want to experience the redemptive qualities. It happens as you embrace your relationship with Jesus. It happens as you shift your perspective. And here's kind of where we'll end, number 3. It happens in verse 5 through 8 as you choose to pray in faith. Let's read this real quick. It says, if any of you lacks any wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously without finding fault, and it will be given to you. But when you ask, you must believe and not doubt, because the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea that is blown and tossed by the wind. That person should not expect to receive anything from the Lord. Such a person is double-minded in all that they do. James is going to say, hey, when you find yourself in unwanted predicaments, when you find yourselves that face trials in your life, when you find yourselves trying to navigate the uncertainty of the moment that you're in, he says you need wisdom, and you need wisdom for how to live with God in the midst of the trials that you're walking through. He says, just ask Him. Just pray to the Lord. Ask for Him to give you the wisdom. On Sunday mornings in the Student Center, we've been looking at a Sermon on the Mount all year long, starting from August, going all the way till finishing last week, because I believe it's here in the Sermon on the Mount that Jesus lays out what it looks like to live a good life. And in Matthew chapter 7, Jesus is going to say a promise that I believe is true for all of those who live a life of Jesus. He says this, "Ask, and it will be given to you. Seek, and you will find. Knock, and the door will be opened to you. For everyone who asks will receive. The one who seeks will find, and the one who knocks, the door will be open." And seniors, that's the promise. That is the new hope that we have in Jesus Christ. It's the moments of our suffering and their trials that we experience life. God is there. God is with us. With you, with me, with us. God is present. Ask. It doesn't say ask and you might receive. It says ask and you will receive. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be open. So seniors, as you walk through this milestone in your life, and we honor it with you, and we're about to give you these Bibles and pray with you, that the peace of our Lord Jesus Christ will be with you wherever you go. That He will guide you through the wilderness, that He'll protect you through the storms, that He'll bring you home rejoicing at the wonders that He has shown you, and that He will bring you home rejoicing again into our doors.